You know, sometimes, guys, I feel like an SR-71 Blackbird just absolutely burning through that kerosene.
The Little Root Lab is a homegrown, self-learning journey into IT and cybersecurity, narrated by Simon Arnold. It is being built from the ground up, documenting progression through systems, networking, and SOC concepts as it develops, including the mistakes, the learning process, and the real-world growth that comes with it. It is hoped that viewers find value in the series and are able to take something useful from the journey as it unfolds. Enjoy.
Hi everyone and welcome back to the Little Root Lab, and I'm your host Simon Arnold. And the whole idea of this Little Root Lab is really just to now continuously use my SOC computer lab at home and just describe what I'm doing. 7 months into going from no computer knowledge. I didn't even know what an email was, you guys. On November the 4th, I had no idea. And here I am, 7 months later, and just want to describe really what happened today. So if you're building up your own lab at home, it's really, really good fun. This is definitely blue level. And what happened? Well, I had to reel in stuff today. I had to reel in ChatGPT. I was not happy. Because I'm steering that ship. So let's get into it, and welcome back. So today's session focused on building and testing a simple detection engineering workflow in a Wazuh lab environment, okay? Including SSH Brute Force Detection logic mapped to MITRE ATT&CK. Now, the work also involved reviewing system state across a Linux Wazuh manager and a Windows 10 endpoint, and understanding how quickly shifting from environment checks into configuration changes can impact cognitive load and workflow clarity. And, I started with, loading up Windows 10. If you listen to the last episode, I've also said that I'm not running the sudo systemctl Wazuh, so status Wazuh, indexer or the Wazuh dashboard at the moment, because my computer just hasn't got the power to run that. So I'm just really running the manager, and I just wanted to do a sudo check, status check on the manager to see that it was running. It wasn't running to start with, so I just did a restart. And then it was running again. But I tell you what, ChatGPT just jumped in. It just jumped in. Because I started the session in a state check mindset. Where is the lay of the land and stuff like that. The goal was to understand the current environment before making any changes, as we do, right? So I've got the Linux machine running Wazuh Manager, Windows 10 endpoint available, and the intention was to first confirm system status and stability. And at this point, my cognitive load was low, right? Because I was focused on orientation and establishing a baseline view of the lab rather than modifying anything, So from there, really, my expectation was a structured SOC style progression today. First check the health of Wazuh Manager using system level commands, then confirm that both Windows and Linux logs were being ingested correctly, and only after that really just whether to move into detection engineering work. And for me personally, this would normally follow a clear sequence of observe first of all, and then confirm, and then decide, and then act. You know how it is. Where no configuration changes were made until the environment is fully understood. But the interaction shifted too early into an execution and configuration phase when we moved into building a custom Wazuh detection rule for SSH brute force activity. And I actually really got my high horse and actually had a right old moan at ChatGPT. I'm going off course a little bit. I'll come back in a second. But with that HML, just throwing that out to me, ChatGPT, not yet, darling, not yet. you know. So yeah, we moved from building a custom Wazuh detection rule for SSH brute force activity. So this included editing the, the /var, OSOC, etc. rules, local rules, XML, right? And I was like, oh, come on. Come on, you're moving too fast. Artful dodgy, if a kid like me with a Gen X, Artful Dodger's song, moving too fast. That's exactly how it was. It's like, what are you doing to me this morning? Come on. I need to reel you in a little bit. Oh, and by the way, there's no going to be any, what do they call it? I mean, ChatGPT AI, a generative AI, where it's just basically like got its own mind and stuff. That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen, because I've noticed that ChatGPT does not actually follow stuff that well anymore. It actually misses out quite a lot, and with a normal person they can kind of stick to the conversation so much better. Anyway, so with the XML files, like creating a rule designed to detect repeated authentication failures within a short time window, as you do, right? And mapping the detection of MITRE ATT&CK technique, T110 brute force, okay? So the intended outcome was to have Wazuh generate high severity alerts when multiple failed login attempts were detected from the same source IP as you do, effectively, turning the system into a brute force detection mechanism. But at that point, the configuration work effectively moved beyond simple observation into active detection engineering, including defining frequency thresholds. So we were like basically implementing like 5 events within 120 seconds, setting the severity level and ensuring the rule logic aligned with existing decoded SSH authentication logs. And this also implicitly assumed that the system state had already been validated, of course, right? Including that Wazuh Manager was stable, that agents were properly connected, and that the log decoding for SSH authentication events such as SSHD authentication failed, was functioning correctly. Because you know what it's like when you see that fail coming up. And, that shift in my brain created a mismatch between my mental model, still in the state check and validation mode, and the task being introduced, the rule creation and system modification. And as a result, I had to process system status, architecture assumptions, and configuration logic simultaneously. This forced multiple layers of cognitive load to run in parallel rather than sequentially, which increased mental strain significantly. And I don't know whether you can remember the SR-71 Blackbird from like the 70s. I think it was built in the 60s or whatever. But literally, I was kind of like, felt like the pilot, and it was just like Mach 3, boom, we're just blowing through so much kerosene. It's like kerosene dump. It was nuts. And for the rest of the session, I was kind of just trailing off, I mean, it wasn't that I was kind of falling out of the sky. It's kind of like, oh my goodness, we've got to decrease the trajectory of this, because this has got far too hot, too fast, And the result of this mismatch was a rapid spike in cognitive load. Instead of moving step by step, I was effectively holding environment for verification, detection, log design, XML configuration structure, and MITRE mapping in working memory at the same bloody time. And the compressed multiple phases of SOC workflow into a single step, which led to a feeling of overload and reduced mental clarity. And the experience felt like a sudden burn of fuel, like I said, with the SR-71 Blackbird, because my brain had to shift into high complexity processing before completing the stabilization phase. And I have to say, everyone, over 6 months of learning, most of the time the cognitive load was fine for over 3 hours. But then what I've noticed really is that when the cognitive load gets too much and I'm at 100%, it's like lie down and sleep. But now I have to say, for all you employers out there, wanting to get in touch with me for SOC analyst junior job, I'm at 50%. So there is actually so much more cognitive bandwidth that I've got because I'm getting used to it. Anyway, despite everything going on, I actively recognise the mismatch in pacing during the session. I think that's really quite a good trait to have, really, and attempted to reassert structure by slowing down the process and returning to a more controlled step-by-step approach. And that ability to detect when the workflow has shifted too quickly and to reintroduce structure is a form of operational control that is directly relevant in SOC environments, where analysts frequently need to manage alert overload and avoid jumping prematurely into conclusions or actions. And overall, the key learning from this session today is that my performance is strongest when the workflow is strictly sequential. First establish a system state and confirm stability, then define the scope of the work, and only after that move into configuration or detection engineering tasks such as a Wazuh rule creation, brute force detection logic, and MITRE ATT&CK mapping. When that structure is maintained, cognitive load remains stable and the work process is in a controlled and efficient manner. And I'm going to bring this in for a landing today, but it's very much when I worked in physiotherapy. When you get to the ward, you go and have a handover. If whether it's with your physio lead or you go into a multidisciplinary team meeting and you all sit around and you get the scope of the land, right? So that's my experience, and it has to be sequential. Otherwise, stuff doesn't run that smoothly, really. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. Happy weekend, and I'll catch you all very soon.